Hello, we are indeed going live. You can hear my voice, and any moment you will be able to see my face, but honestly, it'll be a bit of an anticlimax. Told you. Hello, welcome to the stream. I can already see I've got a couple of people on. Thank you very much for joining me. Now, I've updated the software on my computer overnight. Bloody Apple. The screen seems dirty. Hang on, let's see if I can just make that a bit cleaner. That's better. And Apple seemed to have done something really weird. So I used to be able to control everything that I do using my iPad. So there's a piece of software called OBS Blade, which basically acts as a control panel for the software I'm using to run this stream. But rather than having to do it on the computer when I'm doing other things, I can do it on my iPad. But it won't connect. It says it's not reachable, which has got to be some security setting in the software update. So, yeah. Interesting. Never mind, it just means the transitions won't be quite as smooth. So basically means when I switch over to a writing screen, you will see my control panel briefly until I can be bothered to sort it out, because it must be something I can get around. Probably just need to do a new WebSocket connection, but I'm not going to try and do that now. So what am I here to do today? I'm here to do some writing, obviously. It's a writing stream. Oh, somebody's already left. Okay. That's fine. I'm not offended. All I'm going to do today is a writing stream. So I am trying to get the fifth draft of my book, Still Life, signed off. I just need to send a test text message just to make sure this is all working properly. Let's have a look. Fabulous. It is all in red today. So what I'm going to do now is I wanted to do at least 3 chapters a day. Well, today I'm going to try and do 4 chapters of my book. The reason is that I want to try and get it signed off by Sunday, because this has been a work in progress for far too long, and I haven't actually touched it. I knew I needed to do a 5th draft about 2 years ago, and then promptly got involved in another project, my own project, but started another project and just didn't get anything done. So I'm just going to crack on. This is a fairly crucial point in the story now. So let me just find a bookmark. So I like to use that to underline what I'm doing. Yeah, there we go. And switch over to this view, which will look messy for a second because I can't do it from my laptop. Right then, Chapter 16, Elvington Manor. Isabel lay flat on the grass on the ridge of the low hill that overlooked Elvington Manor. Ooh, let's close down that as well. No, that's not what I wanted to do. She was wearing jeans and a leather coat and looked very different from the first time Rebecca had seen her. She had binoculars and kept scanning the 3-storey building ahead of her. "Anything?" asked Rebecca. "For the final time, when I see anything worth commenting on, I will tell you," said Isabel, with more than a hint of irritation in her voice. "What can you see?" "Some lights on downstairs and one on the first floor. Nothing in the grounds, no sign of Sosie outside, and no sign of Nathan Walsh." Rebecca was sitting on the cold ground next to Isabel. The sky was clear and a partial moon was visible in the sky, giving everything a strange ghostly glow. "Are you thirsty?" asked Rebecca. "I bought a flask of tea." Isabel put down the binoculars and smiled at her. "A muggle that thinks. Who'd have thought it? Yes, please." Rebecca reached into a backpack, pulled out a large vacuum flask with a cup on the top, poured a cup of tea for Isabel, then handed it to her. Isabel accepted it gratefully and took a sip. "Thank you. Are you not having one?" "No," replied Rebecca. "I'm too nervous." "Well, at least you're not running directly towards danger and threatening our safety this time," said Isabel coldly. Rebecca looked away with embarrassment. Rebecca shook her head, her expression softening. "I'm sorry, that was uncalled for. You should have some tea, with some real sugar if you have it. This could be a long night." Rebecca poured herself a cup of tea and took an unenthusiastic sip. Isabel had gone over the plan, such as it was, in the car on the way over. The most likely scenario was that Sosie would disable Walsh and anybody who went into the house with him, in which case, as soon as Sosie had dealt with them, Isabel did not mince her words, she did not expect any of them to survive, the group from the Institute would enter the property and try to subdue Sosie. The Institute believed that he was able to push thoughts and images into people's minds, which was their theory as to how he survived being executed in 1897. The witness accounts from members of the Institute from that era had recorded recorded them overpowering him, hanging him, and then burning the body. Meredith Lawson had arranged for the Institute members, who were the strongest pilots, to come up from Leicestershire. They'd already met and briefed at this and tat and were on their way in 5 cars. Geraldine was coordinating and keeping in touch with Isabel. "Do you think Saywood's okay?" Rebecca asked Isabel. The first thing Isabel had done on arrival was use her tracing skills to ensure that both Sosie and Saywood were in the building. "I have no idea," said Isabel, returning to look through the binoculars. "She's alive, though." Well, she had been when she run her trace half an hour ago, thought Isabel, but she was not going to say that to Rebecca. Isabel's phone gently buzzed, and she glanced down at it. "They're almost here." A few seconds later, it started to continuously vibrate. Isabel had set it to silence and a call was coming through. She lifted it to her left ear and continued to watch through the binoculars. "Geraldine, we're all here. What do you want us to do?" "As discussed, the house has 4 entrances, split into four groups, and set up safe observation points for each entrance once we know what the private investigator and his lot are doing. Bearing I might change that to so we know, not once we know. Yeah. So, as discussed, the house has 4 entrances, split into 4 groups and set up safe observation points for each entrance, so we know what the private investigator and his lot are doing. Bear in mind that Walsh might also have people watching, so don't move into position until I tell you to do so. There was a pause before Geraldine responded. "Understood. Thank you, Isabel." The call ended, and Isabel drew in a sharp intake of breath. "I have 3 figures making their way to the front door. Their faces are covered." "I see 3. I see." She tossed the phone to Rebecca. "Make yourself useful. Call Geraldine and let her know that Mr. Walsh's party have arrived." 3 men, all wearing khaki combat clothing with paint streaked across their faces, were walking stealthily across the lawn area beyond the tree line. Each of them wore an earpiece, and 2 of them were carrying guns. The shortest man was Nathan Walsh. He was the only one not carrying a weapon. Their plan was simple. Groups of 3 would enter the entrances of the house simultaneously. They'd studied and memorised the floor plans of the building and decided that the most likely place for someone to be held was the basement. Thanks to Walsh's previous visits, they knew which room contained the specific piece of artwork that Sir Teddy wanted. Sir Teddy had agreed that saving Saywood had to be the priority and the recovery of the painting was the secondary objective. Team 4 would look after that, and the rest were tasked with finding Saywood. Sir Teddy had agreed that saving Saywood had to be the priority. The cover of the painting was their secondary objective. Team 4 would look after that, and the rest were tasked. And the other 3 would concentrate on, is probably a better way of saying that. Sir Teddy had agreed that saving Saywood was the priority and the recovery of painting was their secondary objective. Team 4 would look after that and the other 3 would concentrate on Saywood. That's better. Although Walsh had instigated this raid, he was not the commander of the operation. The men were part of a security force that he had hired. They were not mercenaries. They did not get involved in foreign wars. I'm going to use lose of or disputes of that ilk. They involved in foreign wars, but were occasionally used by private investigators for reconnaissance. Their use of weapons was illegal. Most of the number were retired army officers. The man in charge was a tall, broad-built man in his 50s who went by the name Captain Moreno. This was not his real name, of course. None of the men working for Nathan Walsh this evening had revealed their real names to him. This is Team 1 Alpha. Team 1 is in position. All teams report, said Moreno. He heard the 3 other team leaders confirm they were in place through his earpiece. On my mark, he said. Walsh tensed. This was it. Moreno raised his fingers and counted down verbally with his hand. 3, 2, 1, go. You can see I've been watching movies, can't you? The other man in the group was carrying a large red battering ram. With 2 grips, he hoisted it back and swung it into the double doors at the front of the building. There was a loud crack, but the door did not open. Swearing, the man swung it again, and this time the doors gave way. He dropped the ram and pulled a Glock from his belt. One by one, the other teams confirmed that they had entered the building. Their surveillance suggested that nobody had come in or out of the manor since lunchtime. Moreno, Walsh and the 3rd man ran into the hall, Walsh hanging back as he'd been instructed. The 2 men made a visual inspection of the hallway. Moreno even ran half of the way up the stairs and looked at the landing at the top. Clear, he declared. Walsh, meanwhile, had run over to the door that led down to the cellar. Moreno joined him and they stepped through the doorway together. Moreno indicated their comrade should wait at the top. To their colleague. Moreno indicated to the comrade that he should wait at the top of the stairs, and they walked carefully. And they walked quietly and carefully down, gun and torch. Moreno indicated the comrade he should wait at the top of the stairs, and then he descended quietly and carefully. Then he sang gun and torch clasped together. Walsh followed. At the bottom of the stairs was a door. Moreno switched off his torch for a moment and looked at the door to see if there were any lights on and looked. And looked around the door. Looked around the door to see if there were any lights on in the cellar. There did not appear to be. Moreno opened the door and swung the torch around the room. Walsh, he said softly, this room configuration is not the same as the plan you gave us. That wall should not be there. Moreno approached the door in the middle of the unexpected barrier, again turning off the torch for a moment to see if there was light on the other side. There was not, so he turned his torch back on and quietly opened the door. He swung the torch around. There was a bathroom on the far side. Swung the torch around, revealing a bathroom on the far side. There was not, so he turned his torch back on and quietly opened the door. He swung the torch around, revealing a bathroom on the far side, which had been on the schematics. So this extra wall and door were the only additions. The bathroom door was open. Both rooms were empty. The room smelled awful. The room smelled of a mixture of human waste and ammonia. Blah. Right. A voice came over the earpiece. This is Team 1, Charlie. I've visual on Team 4 who are climbing the main stairs in the hall. Walter appeared at the door. She's not here, he asked. No, confirmed Moreno. Team 1 Alpha to all teams. We have checked the cellar. It is empty. There is no sign of the captive. All teams report positions. Team 2 said they'd entered via the west wing of the building, through the kitchens, and reported no contact with anyone. Team 3 had come at the opposite end and was working through the drawing rooms. Team 4 had entered the service door, passed through the main hall, and was currently on the stairwell between the first and second floors in the east wing. According to the information Walsh had given them, the room furthest from the stairs at the top of the room was the gallery, which was where Team 4 were heading. The three men that made up Team 4 moved quietly along the corridor, guns and torches before them. Their objective was to take a painting from the room ahead of them. Walter provided photographs which they had committed to memory. They all knew the picture should be the fifth one along, immediately after the largest painting on that wall, which is of a pilot next to her World War II bomber. The men silently stopped outside the door. There was a light on in the room. The team leader moved back down the corridor away from the door to speak into his headset. This is Team 4 Alpha, he said quietly. The gallery is occupied. Repeat, the gallery is occupied. Request assistance. There was a pause. This is Team 1 Alpha. Our objective was not in our anticipated location. We will join you. Await our arrival. The lead soldier moved back to join the rest of the men by the gallery door. Suddenly, it opened, and Max Sosi stepped out. He saw three men pointing a gun at him and raised his hands above his head. I surrender, he said immediately. Stay completely still, shouted one of the men. The other two carefully entered the gallery. On the floor was a dirty mattress with a black girl in a tight tracksuit sitting on it. Next to her was a bin liner, and in front of it was a painting. In front of it all was a painting, which was an image of the girl, or one very like her, sitting on a mattress surrounded by rubbish, and an alley that was lit by a single street light. There was graffiti on the walls behind her. Strangely, although the picture of the girl's body matched the girl on the floor... Let's just say the picture of the body matched the girls on the floor. The picture of the body matched the girl on the floor. That doesn't quite work. Strangely, although the picture... artwork. Although the image of the artwork matched the girl on the floor, the image of the artwork, the girl on the canvas had no face. How does that work? There was graffiti on the walls behind her. Strangely, although the image on the artwork matched the girl on the floor, there's graffiti on the walls behind her. Strangely, although the image of the artwork matched the young lady on the floor, the girl on the canvas had no face. The man guarding Sosi outside the gallery indicated that he get down on his knees. Sosi did as he was told, then looked at the man. For a brief moment... The man guarding Sosi outside the gallery indicated he get down on his knees. Sosi did as he was told, then looked at him. For a brief moment, the soldier felt a strange feeling in the back of his mind. Then he turned his gun and fired point blank into his head. By the time he hit the ground, Sosi had dashed into the gallery door and peered into the room. One of the soldiers had been helping Sawa to her feet, but as a result of hearing the shot, both of them were now pointing their guns towards the door. Moreno's voice sounded over the radio. Team 4, what happened? Sosi peered through the corner and made eye contact with one of the soldiers, who immediately raised his gun. Sosi ducked back out of sight. This is Team 4 Alpha, said the team leader. We encountered Zulu. We have one man down. I'm coming in with my hands up, Sosi shouted into the gallery. Am I safe to do so? Hands in the air or we will fire, shouted the man. This is Team 4 Alpha. Zulu is entering... He pressed button. His team for Alpha zoos into the gallery with his arms up. Sosi entered the room, his arms raised. Both soldiers trained their guns on him. I surrender, said Sosi. Please don't shoot me. Get down on your knees. The soldier approached Sosi and was about to check him for weapons when he heard a shot. Sayward screamed. The man turned to see his colleague on the ground, blood pumping from his head. He had fallen onto the table next to the easel, scattering brushes, water and pots of paint all over the carpet. The remaining soldier's radio was still on. Christ, the man said. Evans just shot himself. Get down on your knees. Soldier approached Sosi was about to check him for weapons when he heard a shot. Sayward screamed. The man turned to see his colleague on the ground, blood pumping from his head. He had fallen on the table next to the easel, scattering brushes, water and pots all over the paint. The remaining soldier tapped his earpiece. Evans just shot himself, he reported. Drop your gun, cried Sayward, or he'll make you do the same. The soldier felt his arm rising. He tried to fight it for a moment. There was a battle against the compelling voice in his head that was commanding him to kill himself. He used it for a few seconds, but that was long enough for Sosi to pull a gun from his waistband and shoot him down. The man fell to the floor, dropping the gun as he did so. Well, said Sosi as he pushed the gallery doors closed from the inside and locked them. That surprised me. He looked down at Sayward and at the almost completed painting on the easel. There isn't time to finish that now. It will have to do. He pointed the gun at Sayward. Sorry, this is not quite what I had planned. And then I put the first gunshot. The first gunshot made the sound of the. That's better. The distant sound of the first gunshot made Rebecca jump. She'd been midway through a cup of tea when. The distant sound of the first gunshot made Rebecca jump. She'd been moved over for a cup of tea and had dropped the cup in surprise. Through a sugary. She'd been moved through a sugary tea and had dropped the cup in surprise. She was about to stand, but Isabel grabbed her arm. Stay down, she ordered. What are we going to do? That could be Sayward. It could be, but it probably is, but probably isn't. What you're hearing is almost certainly Mr. Walsh and his men ending their own lives. It was such a horrible thing to say, but Isabel said it as a matter of fact without a hint of emotion. Rebecca frowned and looked anxious. I don't understand. Sosi can make people obey his will. At one at a time, they will be shooting themselves. I think that's over-explaining. I don't understand. Sosi can make people obey his will. That's awful, whispered Rebecca. How can you be so calm about it? Because we know what Sosi is capable of. If we go in there and try to save those men, it would almost certainly end with our deaths as well. Our team need to be able to concentrate on subduing Sosi, something we can do using our abilities, but only if there are no other distractions. But he's going to kill Sayward, shouted Rebecca. Isabel's eyes widened. Shut up. I think keep the noise down. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. She hissed. He has no choice now. The gunshots were heard by someone, neighbours or whatever, so the police are probably on their way. Is he going to take on the entire... Is he going to take on the entire Leicestershire Constabulary? But he has no choice now. The gunshots will have been heard by someone, neighbours or whatever, so the police are probably on their way. Is he going to take on the entire Leicestershire Constabulary? That's a better way of putting that. Isabel frowned. Annoyingly, what Rebecca was saying made sense. It would not look good if they were caught in the house with a lot of corpses. If the police are called, it will take them a while to get here. They'll have to come from the city. That gives us 10 or 15 minutes. I doubt they will send a lone car to investigate shots. Isabel clicked her fingers. Phone. Rebecca passed to the phone and Isabel dialed. Geraldine, Rebecca's made a good point. The police are probably on their way. We need to get in there or he's going to kill Saywood. I have no choice but to. Rebecca passed to the phone and Isabel died. Geraldine, Rebecca's made a good point. The police are probably on their way. We need to get in there. He's going to have no choice but to kill Saywood. I'm going to sneeze again. There was a pause as she listened to what Geraldine was saying. Yes, I do think she's worth it. I think she should now be our directive. Should now be our objective, not him. There was a long pause. I know what I'm saying, Geraldine. I don't like it either, but I think she's our best hope. Perhaps our only hope of defeating Sosie in the long run. So instead of entering in groups, we need to go in together. Through the front door. Now! Excuse me. Oh, shit. Excuse me again. Oh dear, excuse me. There was another terse exchange. Rebecca watched wide-eyed. Isabel ended the call and pocketed her phone. We're going in. You must stay here. You must stay here. It's going to be dangerous. Isabel showed a hint of emotion as her eyes reddened slightly. It's going to be impossible to keep all of us safe. Some of us are going to die in there. I'm sorry, but I can't watch out for you as well. Rebecca understood. She nodded, and Isabel grabbed hold of her hand, which took her by surprise. Isabel briefly flinched, gave Rebecca a strange look, then nodded and hugged her. She stepped away and started running down the grass bank towards the line of trees, Elvington Manor and Geraldine. You will stay still, said Sosie. Cried. You will stay still, cried Sosie. I won't, yelled Saywood. Sosie lunged for her and tried to reach out with the tip of his mind to immobilise her, but somehow she managed to bat his influence away. Shaking his head, he raised the gun. Stay still, you little bitch. Saywood glanced down at the bodies of the men in combat uniform, then back at Sosie. You will have to shoot me. Either way I'm going to die, so what have I got to lose? Sosie aimed the gun at and fired. He aimed to miss, but Saywood did not know this, and she screamed. The shock immobilised her for a moment, which was all Sosie needed. He leapt foot towards her, and this time she was too shocked to jump out of the way. He smashed the back of the gun into the side of her head, knocking her to the ground. Sosie glanced back at the doors. He could hear no feet approaching or attempts to breach them, but it would not be long. He grabbed her arms and dragged her across the easel. Did he have time? If the incantation was interrupted... I'm going to just reorder the words in that paragraph. So I'm going to move the did he had time from there to there. He grabbed her arms and dragged her across the easel. If the incantation was interrupted, they would not get a second opportunity to complete it. Did he have time? He was only going to get one chance. Yeah, that's slightly better. Saywood groaned and tried to wriggle from his grasp. He kicked her viciously in the chest and she stopped. He pulled her over to the easel and Saywood tried to stand up again. In annoyance he leaned down, grabbed her by the throat and started squeezing. Her eyes were wide with fury and fear, but as he squeezed he could feel the strength draining from her. Smiling sadistically, he pulled her prelato from his pocket. Her mouth was wide open to try and draw breaths, which were made impossible by the hand around her neck. He forced the small stone and cord into her mouth and tried to push it with his fingers to the back of her throat. Saywood had no breath left with which to choke, but the contact from the stone suddenly opened up the trapped minds in the paintings on the walls to her again. Let's lose the on the walls. And this time they were louder than before. Drawing her last ounces of strength, Saywood grabbed hold of Sosie's arms and pulled him towards her. The amplified emotions jumped into his... smashed. Hey Siri, synonyms for smashed.
Synonyms for smashed include break, break to pieces, and smash to smithereens.
The amplified emotions burst into his consciousness and he stumbled forward, letting go of her. Saywood rolled out of the way. At that moment there was the sound of a gunshot and part of the door around the lock seemed to shatter. There was another shot and the door was kicked open. Moreno burst into the room and immediately shot himself in the head. Another man followed and as soon as he made eye contact with Sosie, he too ended his own life. Sosie rushed over to Saywood, punched her in the head again and tried to drag her by the legs back to the easel, but she kicked out, catching him in the groin. He fell back. He yelled and fell back in surprise. Saywood crawled over to the side of the room and tried to stand up, all the time trying to cough the stone from her throat. She could feel consciousness slipping away and made one final effort to stand. She reached up and used the frame of the nearest picture to drag herself upright, the streams of the people trapped in the artwork tearing through her mind. She tried to push them away. This can't be it, she thought. I want to live. The words repeated over and over in her head, and she realised that the words were very similar to those being screamed by the girl in the purple dress in the picture she was hanging on to. This can't be the end. The voice was screaming, I want to live. The thought was constantly being repeated. There was no change in intonation. It was the same brief phrase, but getting louder and louder. Saywood's thought merged with the other voice, so there were two simultaneous screams inside her head. This can't be the end. I want to live, they screamed in unison over and over again. Saywood could not draw a breath because of the prelato blocking a windpipe, and her mind was getting fuzzy. She could not separate her thoughts from that of the poor soul trapped in the painting. Her last consideration as consciousness overtook her was that Rebecca would have known what to do to save her. I love you. From Choking. Her last consideration as unconscious overtook her. Her last consideration as unconscious overtook her was that Rebecca would have known what to do to save her from choking. I love you, Bex, was her final thought, as the screams of I want to live echoed through her mind before cutting out a split second later. The moment that Saywood lost consciousness, several things happened at once. There was a bright flash. 6 of Moreno's men burst into the gallery, their guns pointing ahead of them. A wave of calm swept across the room as images of poppies in a sunny field entered everyone's minds, causing the armed men to stop what they were doing for a second. A girl in a purple dress and a bruised and swollen face pulled Saywood to her feet, stood behind her, put her arms around her middle, and applied some abdominal thrusts to her chest. The stone blockage flew upwards from her throat into her closed mouth. I'm going to lose the cracking some teeth. Just say hitting her teeth. Saywood coughed, fell to her knees, and spat out the prelato. Sosie pulled out his gun as Isabel ran into the room, swiftly followed by Geraldine Jagvir, the masked lady, and some other Institute members. They were followed by 3 armed police officers. Everyone stop transmitting, shouted Isabel. Her colleagues looked at each other but stopped sending out the calming image. 9 guns were suddenly trained on Sosie. He looked around him and placed his gun on the floor. He was standing by the rear window. By the curtain. Then he stepped quickly behind it. He was standing by the curtain before the rear window, then stepped quickly behind it. Step back from out behind. Step back out from behind the curtain, commanded one of the armed police officers, or we will fire. The curtain remained still. You could have another weapon behind there, cried one of the soldiers. The 6 of them trained their guns on the curtain. The police not which way to point their weapons. Put the guns down, demanded the lead police officer. With respect, you don't know what he can do, said the soldier, gesturing to his colleagues lying dead on the ground from self-inflicted wounds. Fire! All 6 men simultaneously fired into the curtain, spraying them with bullets. When they stopped, the lead soldier placed his gun on the ground. Guns on the floor, he said softly to his men. They did as they were told. And away from his commanding officer, one of the policemen went over to the curtains and pulled them open, his colleagues surveying them, covering him with their weapons. The windows were smashed. The police officer looked outside, but there's no sign of a body on the ground or anyone running away. He's not here, he said. Jagver edged over to Isabel. What do we do now? He must have walked out via the gallery door, said Isabel. He'll be out of the house by now. She pointed over to Saywood, who was on her knees, taking in great lungfuls of hair. Help her. You all right? The young girl in the purple dress was down on her knees next to Saywood. I think so, thanks to you, said Saywood gratefully. She looked at the girl, and with shock, she noticed the figure in the painting behind her no longer had a face. Who are you? My name's Molly, said the girl in confusion. Molly Clark. Where am I? What's happening? And yes, her name is Molly Smith, but I think she's only just got married, literally. And, yeah, it's all a bit weird in her head. Right, so that is chapter 16. Fine with that. So let's export it as a Word document. Let's get me Grammarly open. Okay. Children's code in the group. Informing Isabel of their movement. Hey Siri, synonyms for swing. Hey Siri, synonyms for swung.
I found some web results. I can show them if you ask again from your iPhone.
Oh, bugger off then. Smash down the door. Right, that'll do me. I don't care what's new in notes, to be honest, just... Right, there we go. So that's that chapter done. Woohoo! Only three more to do. Well, see how I go. I don't have to do them all in one session after all. Let's just drag that into the completed. And 17 is literally the middle chapter. So there are 33. So, let's have a look at this chapter. Chapter 17, The Temporal Refugees. Saywood looked around her in confusion. There were 4 men wearing something akin to army fatigues lying dead on the floor. 6 further men in identical uniforms being handcuffed by armed police, and more police were entering the room. The curtains that covered the windows overlooking the rear gardens were shredded, and the glass behind broken. It doesn't say behind, but it should. Behind them broken. She could have sworn that Jagvir and Geraldine had been in here with several other people a moment ago, but she could not see any of them now. Jagvir Saywood was aware of a pain in her teeth, and that her prelato was on the floor in front of her. Also, there was a terrified young girl in a flowery hat and purple dress standing near the painting of the old car. "Where am I?" the girl repeated. Her face bore the same signs of abuse that covered Saywood's. Her left eyelid was purple and bruised, but it had not closed. Saywood mentally reached out to her, and a wave of the girl's most recent memories washed over her. She felt sick with revulsion at what she saw. Saywood had got off lightly. What Sosie had put this poor girl through was horrendous. She was from somewhere by the sea. Lived. She lived somewhere by the sea, so see that clearly, but the images in the girl's mind made no sense. No modern technology, no knowledge of any music or celebrities. She was from the past. It was the only explanation that made any sense. So would levered herself upwards, but a paramedic made her sit back down so that her wounds could be examined. She saw that uniformed paramedics were trying to do the same for Molly, but she was resisting. "Don't touch me!" Molly was yelling, trying to pull away. Saywood waved in the face of a paramedic to get his attention. "Let me talk to her," she said. "Who is she?" asked the paramedic. "I don't know," said Saywood, "but I'm pretty sure she's been sexually assaulted recently. She's in a state of shock and panicking." "Has anything like that happened to you?" Did anything like that happen to you? "Did anything like that happen to you?" the paramedic asked gently. Saywood shook her head. Molly was shrinking away from the man that was attempting to help her. "Let me speak to her," said Saywood. The man nodded and offered his hand to help her up. Saywood approached Molly. "Molly," she said softly, "everyone here wants to help you." The girl was crying uncontrollably and utterly terrified. "I don't understand where I am," Molly cried. "Max hurt me. He said he was going to kill me. Where am I?" "I'm not sure where we are," admitted Saywood. "Sit down here with me. I need to tell you something." There was something soothing about her voice, and Molly did as she was told, her back against the wall. Saywood lowered herself painfully down beside her. "What year is it?" she asked gently. "You don't know the year?" asked Molly in surprise. "No, Sosie hit my head. I don't remember." "It's 1915, said Molly. Saywood took her hand. "I do know the year," she admitted. "I just wanted to know what year you thought it was. It's actually 2018. You've been trapped in your picture for 103 years. Molly shook her head. "I don't understand. 1 minute he's painting me, then he's strangling me, then I'm helping you freeze something from your throat. How did I know how to do that?" "When I passed out, it was my last thought," said Saywood. "Rebecca, my friend, once helped me when I was choking. I was wishing she was here to help me. Somehow my thoughts went into you." "I still don't understand," said Molly as she sobbed, tears dripping down her face. I think I might just add a little. "When I passed out, was my last thought," said Saywood. "Rebecca, my friends, wanted to help me when I was choking. I was wishing she was here to help me. Somehow my thoughts went into you." "I piloted her," Saywood thought to herself with a shudder. Not that she felt especially guilty on this occasion. She would be dead if she had not. I still don't understand, said Molly as she sobbed, tears dripping down her face. Saywood shook her head. I don't know why you're here, she said, looking around her and at some of the other pictures on the walls. Was she somehow responsible for releasing Molly? Could she free all of the other people from these paintings too? The paramedic that had been examining Saywood knelt next to them. We would like to take you into hospital to get you checked out. Her too. Indicated Molly. You seem to be able to get through to her. Can you persuade her? A police officer with 3 stripes on the sleeve of his uniform walked through the gallery door, his eyes searching the room. When he saw Saywood, he approached her. I'm assuming that I'm addressing Miss Saywood Amapovo, he said when he was standing in front of her. Saywood nodded. There was a young lady at the door claimed to be a friend of yours, a Rebecca Taylor. She's waiting by the ambulance. Are you happy to see her? Yeah, but are you willing to see her? If not, I could have her moved away. There's a young lady at the door claims to be a friend of yours, Rebecca Taylor. She's waiting by the ambulance. Are you willing to see her? If not, I could have her moved away. Saywood's heartbeat quickened. I'd love to see her, she said with a warm smile. So nodded. There was a young lady at the door claiming to be a friend of yours, Rebecca Taylor. She's waiting by the ambulance. Are you willing to see her? If not, I could have her moved. Saywood's heartbeat quickened. I'd love to see her, she said with a warm smile. I won't get rid of her then, said the sergeant with a grin. He walked away, talking into his radio as he did. Saywood turned to Molly. These men are paramedics. They are like doctors. They want us to go to hospital to let some doctors check that we are okay. Molly shook her head. I can't pay for no doctor. Saywood took her hand and squeezed it. You won't have to pay. I've already paid, she improvised. It was kind of true. We just want to make sure you aren't too badly hurt, Molly. I promise you it's safe. Can I stay with you? Asked Molly. Of course, said Saywood soothingly, standing up whilst ignoring help from the paramedics. She offered a hand to Molly and pulled her to her feet. 2 paramedics and a police officer led them through the door and into the corridor. There was a blanket just outside the door that was covering another body. Saywood was in a daze and did not recognise anything until they reached the main staircase. Molly was looking around her in shock. They were escorted down the steps to the main door. Outside there was a sea of police vans and cars and several ambulances. And there, standing by the closest ambulance, was a terrified-looking Rebecca. She saw Saywood on the stairs and ran over to her. Saywood, she cried, and threw her arms around her. Saywood returned the hug. They stood there for a few moments, their foreheads touching, staring into each other's eyes. Rebecca took a step back and saw Saywood's face properly for the first time. Oh, my God, Say, what did he do to you? He hurt me, said Saywood simply. But it could have been worse. It could have been a lot worse, love. Saywood tightened her embrace. When they parted, Saywood and Molly were encouraged into the ambulance. I'm coming with ya, insisted Rebecca, climbing into the back. The second paramedic slammed the door closed and the ambulance started the short drive to the hospital. Sir Teddy was sitting in his drawing room. There was a fire laid out and crackling before him, but he still felt cold. He looked at his watch again, wishing that it was later and that he had received an update from Nathan Walsh. I don't like the wishing that it was later. Wishing that he had received an update from Nathan Walsh. He stared at the fire and at the large log that was the large log burning large burning on top of the coals. When he was a child, before he was adopted, his parents' house had featured an open fire, but they had rarely been able to afford to light it. His phone started to ring, so Teddy pulled it from the top pocket and saw that it was from Nathan Walsh. With a slightly trembling hand, he answered, Yes. I need to see you right away, Sir Teddy, said Walsh. I can be at your home in 10 minutes. Is that acceptable? It is indeed, said Sir Teddy. Is everything okay? Not exactly, said Walsh shakily. I'll be with you shortly. "15 minutes later, Mr. Harris ushered Walsh into the drawing room. Walsh looked tired and his face was a pallid grey colour, as though he had recently been sick. Do you require the staff to leave again, sir? Asked Mr. Harris. Sir Teddy considered. Not tonight, Mr. Harris. Please put some music on for me. Der Stein der Weisen, I think. Tonight, I think. Lose the second the repetition of tonight. Then he may leave us. I would call you when Mr. Walsh is ready to depart. Harris went over to a laptop and called up some music. It started playing through the speakers that were hidden throughout the room. Harris inclined his head, then left, closing the door behind him. You look like you need a drink, said Sir Teddy. Please help yourself. He indicated the crystal decanter. What happened? Walsh poured himself a drink and sighed. The good news is that Miss Amapofo is safe, currently in police custody and on the way to the hospital, merely to check her over. Unfortunately, 5 of the 11 men that I employed to get into that house. Just lose the unfortunately. Walsh poured himself a drink and sighed. The good news is that Miss Amapofo is safe, currently in police custody and on the way to hospital. Merely check her over. 5 of the 11 men that I employed to go into the house are dead. So she killed them. Not exactly, said Walsh, taking a larger sip. From what I heard on the radios, they killed themselves. I don't understand, said Sir Teddy. Neither do I, said Walsh. Sosie escaped. I'm not sure how he managed it. I left just before the police arrived. I saw Saywood being put into an ambulance from a vantage point in the hills above the house. The other 6 men in the group I hired have been arrested and taken away too. Oh dear, said Sir Teddy. Is there anything to lead this back to me? The only person who had to contact me was their commander, and he's dead. There's nothing to lead this back to me, let alone you. Sir Teddy nodded. What about the painting? It's still in the house, I'm afraid. But there was one other strange thing I noticed. He could see that there was a photograph of the picture that had been tasked to procure sitting on the table next to the decanter. It's still at the house, I'm afraid. There was one other strange thing I noticed. He could see there was a photograph of the picture that had been tasked to procure sitting on the table next to the decanter. It was now in a gold frame. It was now in a gold picture frame. May I? Sir Teddy nodded. Walsh picked up the picture and looked at it long and hard. What I'm about to tell you makes no sense. I watched the police and the Institute enter the house. Oh no, he wasn't there. He obviously buggered off when it all... Yeah. Where's police and Institute? No, can't... That doesn't make sense. You can't have watched them enter the house. Let's just lose that, because that's the bit that's buggering it up. Walsh picked up the picture and looked at it long and hard. What I'm about to tell you makes no sense. When Say was brought from the house, there was another girl with her. There was another girl with her being taken to the ambulance. I'd not seen her enter the house, so she must have already been in there. He turned the photograph around so the picture was pointing to Sir Teddy. She looked like this. Same face, same clothes. The girl from your painting is probably now at either Glenfield Hospital or the Royal Infirmary. Sir Teddy gasped and picked up his phone. The short trip in the ambulance was not an easy time for Molly Clark. Even though Saywood had explained to her what had happened, she did not understand. Being inside a fast-moving vehicle surrounded by equipment and technology she did not recognise made her feel uneasy, and that unease grew as time went on. She would not let go of Saywood's hand. When they arrived at the hospital and Molly saw all of the vehicle's doctors and paramedics, she started crying and would not stop. She was separated from Saywood and taken into an examination room where she cried in terror when anyone went near her, pushing a doctor out of the way and screaming hysterically. Once Saywood was in a cubicle, she was left alone with Rebecca for the first time since they'd been reunited. They kissed and questioned each other about what had happened. He physically hurt me, Saywood confirmed, tears in her eyes, which was bad enough, but it could have been a lot worse. He didn't, Rebecca started, but Saywood interrupted her. No, he didn't touch me like that in any way. Rebecca squeezed her hands. Saywood pulled one away and gestured to the adjacent cubicle where they could still hear Molly screaming and resisting help. My mind touched hers earlier, Bex. She didn't get away so lightly. Oh my God, the poor girl. Saywood nodded. He hurt her on purpose. I can see flashes from her memories. Saywood used a free hand to brush the fresh tears from her face. Who is she? I don't exactly know, but she's from 1915. This is going to sound utterly mad, but Sosie can do things. You know, like I can see into other people. I can see other people's thoughts. Well, he can do that too, and he can push his thoughts into people's heads. But the thing he was going to do to me, Saywood gave a watery smile and shook her head. This will sound crazy. He was going to trap me in a piece of canvas. He made me change into this, she gestured to her clothes, this outfit, and painted all but my face into his picture. And he was going to use magic, I suppose, to trap me inside it. He said it was easier than disposing of my body. Her face crumpled up again, but she continued. He must have done the same to her over 100 years ago. Somehow I pulled her out of the picture she had been trapped in for over a century. She's devastated, Bex. Lost, embarrassed, hurt and humiliated. She'd have been better off where she was. Rebecca stroked his shoulder. You're okay now, Say. But I'm not though, am I? Said Saywood angrily. He's still out there. Isabel will come up with something. Saywood looked up. Will she? She let Cavi die, she said angrily. She found you, said Rebecca, and she let me come along to your rescue. The Institute people had to make a discreet exit once the police arrived, but on the way out Isabel took the time to phone me and tell me you were okay. She's got a heart of ice, said Saywood. She's rude, admitted Rebecca, but she's the reason you are here, alive. There was another distressed cry from the cubicle next door. The nurse that had been with Saywood when the doctor had checked her over stepped through the curtain. We're struggling to get any sense out of her, the woman explained. The police are trying to establish who she is, but she insists that she was born in 1898. She keeps asking for you. Do you think you can try and calm her down and ask her some questions the police have written down? I don't know her, said Saywood, but I can try. Rebecca handed her a tissue and Saywood dried her eyes, then swung her legs from the hospital bed and onto the ground. She looked down at herself and rolled her eyes. I need to get out of this. I look ridiculous. Rebecca smiled. I have a change of clothes for you in my backpack. The nurse pulled the curtain open and Saywood stepped through. She could hear sobs coming from the next cubicle. Saywood stepped forwards and the police officer that had come with them in the ambulance nodded and opened the curtain. Saywood entered, Rebecca immediately behind her. Molly was sitting on the examination couch, her eyes and cheeks red with tears. Whenever one of the doctors approached her, she shrieked, and if everyone got too close, she lashed out. The doctor looked back to a second policeman who was with him in the cubicle. I don't want to, but I think we may have to sedate her. Saywood stepped forward. Absolutely not, she said fiercely. Molly saw her and opened her eyes wide. Help me, please, please help. I just want to go home. Saywood stepped forward and reached out a hand gently. Molly took it and Saywood walked slowly over to her. Molly threw her arms around her and sobbed. Saywood put one arm around her and patted her gently on the shoulder. With the other. Molly, these people just want to make sure you are well. They need you to answer some questions just to check you are who you say you are. Do you mind if I ask you those questions on their behalf? Molly's face was buried in Saywood's shoulder, but Saywood heard her say, Go on then. When is your birthday, Molly? The policeman nodded, put his hand in Saywood's line of sight. She read the next question, and put his pad in Saywood's line of sight. She read the next question. And where were you born? 13th of April 1898, replied Molly. I was born in Folkestone. Which hospital? Molly raised her head. Hospital? I was born in my mum's house. Saywood patted the back of her head soothingly. What's the last thing you remember? Max Sosie offered to paint me, she said through her tears. He took me to his home in his car and made me change into these clothes. He buried her head into Saywood's shoulder again. He hurt me. Saywood hugged her. Images of what Max had done to Molly flashed through her head, but she knew Molly had to say it. Did he rape you, Molly? She whispered. Suddenly the images flashing through Molly's head changed. With horror, Saywood realised that telling other people what had happened would be as painful for Molly as the actual... Horror? Is that the right word? I'm not sure that's the right word in that particular. Let's lose the with horror. Suddenly the images flashing through Molly's head changed. Saywood realised that telling other people what had happened would be as painful for Molly as the actual attacks had been to endure. Saywood wished she hadn't asked, but poor Molly needed help, and that meant understanding what had happened. There is no shame on you, Molly. I know that you feel there is, but there isn't. He's to blame for everything, not you. Molly was shaking uncontrollably, and her sobs, which had calmed down since Saywood entered the room, had started up again. You don't have to answer, said Saywood, looking back at the police officer and shaking her head. He nodded and pointed to another question. When did you meet him? He picked me up on Saturday, said Molly. It was the day my sweetheart left to go to war. I don't think she'd call him a sweetheart. I think she'd say my Alfie. It was the day my sweetheart is the kind of word that Sophie would use. He picked me up on Saturday, said Molly. It was on the day my Alfie left to go to war, 21st of August. He didn't hurt me that day. It started the day after, or the day after that. Another nurse entered the examination room, closing the curtain behind her. I have a visitor on the way that claims he can identify this young lady. This is going to make me well up, because this is kind of a sad, sweet moment. Ooh. What? Said Rebecca. What? Another nurse entered the examination room, closing the door behind her. I have a visitor on the way that claims he can identify this young lady. What? Asked Rebecca. Don't let him in. It's probably the bastard that did this. I don't think so, said the nurse. He said his name was Sir Teddy Ainsley. He telephoned to say he would arrive in a few minutes. So and Rebecca looked at each other, and Rebecca whispered into her ear, that was the name of the person who employed Nathan Walsh. Saywood nodded. Her eyes met those of the policeman. I think he may know who she is. I have heard the name before. If you can confirm his identity, I think we should let him in. The policeman nodded in agreement. The policeman nodded in agreement, and the nurse left the cubicle. Saywood returned her attention to Molly, who had calmed down again. Tell me about Alfie, she said. Molly looked up and smiled. He's so brave. He lied about his age to get into the army, to fight for king and country. He's called Alfie Smith. He's been away for just over a week. He married me just before he left. She started to cry again, but this time she was weeping gently. I hope he's okay. Has there been any news? News? Asked Saywood. About the war. They said it'd be over by Christmas, but that was last year. The policeman was scribbling things down, and he held up another question for Saywood to ask. Where did Alfie live, Molly? 58 Tontine Street in Folkestone, was her reply. He was so sweet and so brave. He was, said a quiet voice. This is going to set me off, excuse me. Saywood had not noticed the curtain open or an elderly man in his 70s arrive in a wheelchair. Molly looked up. There was something familiar about him, something reassuring. He was all of those things, said the man, despite his appalling start in life and his dreadful, dreadful father. Who are you? Molly asked. The old man had tears in his eyes as he looked at her. My dear Molly, he whispered, I thought he had killed you. I'm so pleased to have finally found you. Who are you? She asked. I'm little Edward, he replied softly. Edward Smith, Alfie's brother. Excuse me? That is a genuinely, if you know the whole story, that is quite a special moment, actually. And always, whenever I read it, it always gives me a mild emotional reaction, which I will now curb, because I need to run that through Grammarly. Okay. Sorry. Right, so file. And that's now, is that 2 chapters done or 3? No, I've got 2 more to do after this. Well, I've got 1 more I have to do, but 2 more I want to do. So let's do the grammar check on this. Okay. I like the way I've worded that. It's 2018. It's actually 20. Okay, I'm going to. He stared at the fire and okay. Actually, yes, that makes sense. Okay, so let's just open it, copy it, paste it, copy it, and pop it back into the original document. Wrong button, don't want to do that, and that. And there we go. So that's chapter 17 done. It actually feels like I'm genuinely making progress now. So let's just minimize all of this. Let's bin all of those. Let's pop chapter 17 into, and that was the middle chapter, so I now have less to do than I've already done, which is nice. I'm going to do another 2 now, and maybe more later. We shall see how I go. So this next chapter, oh, this is quite a short one, and the one after it, normal length. Okay, so let's do these last 2 chapters. God, chapter 18 already. This is mad. Mind you, they are shorter chapters. Okie dokie. Biggity pookie. Right, Wednesday the 17th of January 1962. Hey Siri, what day was the 17th of January 1962?
It was Wednesday, the 17th of January 1962.
Fabulous, thank you. Chapter 18, Edward's story. Edward opened his eyes. He immediately felt dizzy, and there was agonising pain coming from his legs. He was sitting on the floor in a windowless room on dusty floorboards, and he noticed with horror that his right leg ended in a stump rather than a foot. There was a darkened crimson trail leading from his leg to a painting that was upright on the floor, one of several stacked next to each other. Let's do that up. It was an image of a boy in a wheeling chair without a face, and it had a plain black background. There was a large piece of cloth on the floor next to the pictures, which he assumed he had been covering them, and 2 more cloths which were covering what were almost certainly covering. Let's lose that. Covering more pictures, perhaps 15 in all. The room was not empty, unlike the one he remembered being in moments ago. At the back was a floor-to-ceiling wine rack filled with dust-covered bottles. There was a tail lamp. There was a tall lamp and an easel with a small table. Next to the room was not empty, unlike the one I remember being in moments ago. At the back was a floor-to-ceiling wine rack filled with dust-covered bottles. There was a tall lamp and an easel next to a small table with little pots of paint on it. They at least seemed familiar. The memories of what had happened happened. The memories of what had happened came back to him. Sosie had smashed his legs. Then what? Run away? There was a door at the far end of the room and it opened slowly. Edward's already frantic heart rate quickened until he realised the person coming in was not the man that deliberately mutilated him. A woman, perhaps in her mid-30s. A woman in her let's lose the perhaps. In her early 30s entered the room. "Help me!" croaked Edward as he tried and failed to stand up. The woman was wearing a pair of blue trousers that were snug on her body and a thick blue coat with a fur-lined hood. Her hair was close-cropped and blonde and she had an upturned mouth that looked like she was used to smiling. It was not, however, smiling now. She looked down at him. "Quiet," she said in a low voice. "Sosie's upstairs. This is our only chance to get out of here." "Who are you?" Edward asked, confused. "A friend," she said. "My name is Dawn. You're in no fit state to walk, but you have no choice." Dawn crossed over to the table. "I'm going to have to make an adjustment here." And pushed the paints onto the floor. They made a louder noise than she would have liked, but there was no time to be more careful. She picked up the table and placed it next to Edward. "Use this to help you stand up. What's your name, lad?" "Edward. I need to get you up a flight of stairs, but we have to be quick." Edward rolled himself onto his side. Dawn tried to help him stand, but he was tall and broad, and she struggled with his weight. Edward tried to lever himself up using the table, but fell heavily back onto the ground. Dawn looked to the door at the top of the steps in fears. "We need to be quieter and cleverer than that, Edward," she said. "If Sosie hears us, we are dead." Edward looked up at her. His vision was blurred and he felt dizzy. He had no idea what was happening, but he knew that he did not want to die. He started crawling across the floor. "I'll crawl up the stairs," he said. "I'll pull myself up the stairs," he said. Dawn followed him. His legs were smashed. He was wearing short trousers, unlike the figure in the painting, and he was pulling himself forwards with his arms. Forward. On this occasion, it does feel like it should be forward. She rushed up the stairs to the door and pulled it wide open. Edward looked up towards her and felt another wave of dizziness and nausea. He stopped for a moment and vomited onto the floor. Dawn watched, knowing that their chances of survival were rapidly diminishing. Edward got to the foot of the stairs. Dawn stepped. Let's lose the step forward. Dawn reached down. Dawn reached down and he grasped. Dawn reached down and he grasped her hand with this, managing to use the other to grip the railings. The damage to his legs was all below the knee on the left-hand side. So he dragged himself up the stairs, losing his left hand and right knee, with Dawn pulling him. That way they reached the top in just over a minute. To the right of the cellar entrance, across a short hall with wooden flooring, was the front door. Dawn stepped across and used a key from a pocket to unlock it. She rushed back to Edward, who raised his body onto his left knee. She leaned down and pulled him upwards. There was a flight of steps going up and over the cellar door, and Edward used the wooden railings to pull himself upright. Dawn stood next to him, trying to support him. "Transfer your weight onto me," she ordered. "Did you ever do the three-legged race at school?" Edward nodded. His face was pale, and his hand felt clammy in hers. He put his left arm around her and gripped her tight. She put her right around him. "Watch my right leg. Move your left at the same time if you can." Edward transferred his full weight onto her. He was unbelievably heavy for such a skinny lad, but his grip was tight and the weight was relatively even. Let's lose the relatively. It was evenly distributed. Dawn put her left leg forward. "And now, move your leg. I'll count to 2. Move your leg. I'll count to 2. Move your leg on 2. We need to find a rhythm." Slowly, with Dawn counting 1, 2, 1, 2, quietly over and over again, they started moving forwards. In 10 steps at the front door, was just wide enough for them to step through. Once they were outside, Edward felt the bite of the cold. He could see that there was a frost on the ground. "Cold," he muttered. Right, because this just made no sense before. Why should come with the intention of rescuing someone, but then have no method of getting them away? So that's my car is up the road, said Dawn. If we can get here, if we can get there, I can get us away. We need to get to it. I can get us away and get you some help. Edward stopped. Leave me, he said as he coughed. Dawn shook her head angrily and dragged him onwards. Between them, keeping the rhythm, they walked down the driveway. The main gate was closed, but there was a smaller one to the side and it was wide open. When they got there, Dawn had to let go for a moment, so Edward held onto the gatepost as she stepped through and repositioned herself next to him. They passed a white... Right, this is the bit I need to add. A small car was parked just up the road. As they approached, Dawn could see that something did not look right. The car was at an odd angle, and when she looked closely, she could see that each tyre had a large slash on it. In it, she swore. That's no use then. There's a telephone box near the church. We'll phone for help from there. Okay, let's just do this whole little section again. Between them, keeping their rhythm, they walked down the driveway. The main gate was closed, but there was a smaller one next to the side and it was open. When they got there, Dawn had to let go for a moment, so Edward held onto the gatepost. She stepped through and repositioned herself next to him. A small car was parked just up the road. As they approached, Dawn could see that something did not look right. The car was at an odd angle, and when she looked closely, you could see that each tyre had a large slash in it. She swore. That's no use then. There's a telephone box near the church. We'll phone for help from there. They continued down the narrow country road. Edward could see something illuminated in the distance, which he assumed was a village, although the lights were much brighter than he was used to. They soon came to a red box with lots of windows, marked telephone. Dawn, who was exhausted, loosened her grip on him. I'm going to let you down now, she said. She tried to lean down to release him, but his dead weight became too much for her, and she dropped Edward to the floor. He grunted as she hit the ground, but rolled on. He grunted as he hit the ground, but rolled onto his back and sat up so he was leaning on the red box, leaning with his back too. Against. Dawn pulled the door open and stepped inside. She dialed 39s, but Edward could not take in what she was saying. Dawn pulled the door open and stepped inside. She dialed the number and started speaking, but Edward could not take in what she was saying. The cold was getting to him, and he could feel that his body wanted to sleep. He knew that this was a bad idea, that he might never wake up, but the urge was overwhelming him. What seemed like a few seconds later, Dawn was slapping his face. "Edward, you need to stay awake." He turned and tried to focus on her eyes. She was kneeling beside him, deep concern on her face, in her face, on her face, deep concern on her face. "Tell me how I got here," he mumbled. Dawn grabbed his hand. "You're freezing cold." She stood again, took off her coat and laid it over his body. "Do you remember Sosie capturing you?" Edward nodded. "How could I forget? According to what was written on the back of the painting, that was in 1923. Brace yourself for a shock, but almost 40 years have passed since then. It's 1962 now." Edward shook his hand. "It can't be." Dawn grasped his hand. "It is. The other pictures in the cellar are also poor souls like you that he locked into the canvas." A tear ran down her cheek. I could hear their screams as I entered the house. "I don't understand." "Sosie is a powerful dark mage. Rather than kill people, he traps them in his paintings. A few of his works have surfaced over the years. I also have limited talents, nothing in his league, mind you, but I believed that I could reverse the process and free prisoners from the canvases. Unfortunately, the committee would not let me into the archive to test my theory on one of his pieces. Last year I heard a rumour that Sosie was still alive. I've done a foolish thing. Rather than tell them what I was doing, I investigated alone. When I found him in his house, I thought I would sneak in and prove my point, save someone. I thought that would be enough for them to take me seriously." "Why did you save me?" croaked Edward. Dawn looked sheepish. "It was a mistake," she admitted. "I could see you in a wheelchair, so I decided to free someone else, someone I would not need to help out of the house. But then Sosie came home mid-incantation, and your voice was shouting the loudest from the pictures. I was distracted and freed you by accident." She looked down at his mutilated legs, partially covered by her coat. "He's a monster. I can't believe what he's done to you." Edward let his head flop back. "Ethel," he whispered to himself. "You'll be an old lady by now." He closed his eyes. "Please try and keep your eyes open," said Dawn. "You must stay awake." "So cold," muttered Edward. Dawn squeezed his hand. She was not certain that he would survive, even if help arrived soon. Suddenly the sound of dogs barking in the distance echoed. Suddenly they heard a new sound, the sound of dogs barking in the distance. Dawn closed her eyes for a second. Suddenly she heard a new sound. Dawn closed her eyes. They would have left blood on the hall floor, which would have led back to the cellar. Sosie would easily been able to work out what had happened when he found the picture. And if they were his dogs, he could follow a scent. She jumped up. "We need to get into the phone box," she said. Edward glanced groggily up at her. "What? Can you hear the dogs?" "Yes," said Edward. "They're getting closer." Dawn nodded. "I think they're his. We need to get into the phone box." She grabbed Edward by the hand, but he was almost incapable of helping. The sounds were getting louder. "Help me," she cried to him. Edward tried to focus and turned over onto his knees. Again he tried to use his less badly damaged limb to push himself upwards, but it was too painful. Dawn dragged him to his knees and pushed him into the phone box. She was about to step in with him and close the door when she felt a sharp pain of canine teeth in her leg. In fear she turned away as the second dog leapt up and tried to bite her throat. She pushed it away, but her fingers were bitten in the process. She slammed her back into the door, forcing it closed. Edward slumped over, trapped inside, not knowing what was happening. Two more dogs ran up to the phone box, snapping their teeth at her. One jumped up and tried to bite her throat again, and this time she felt breath in her face and sharp teeth. She punched out and the dog fell away. She raised her hand to her neck and it came away sticky with blood. She fell to her knees and the dogs were about to tear into her when a voice called out, "Stay!" Sosie was running up behind the animals. Dawn could feel the blood dripping from her neck. Sosie walked up to her. "I don't know how you did it, but thanks to you, I have a space in one of my paintings that needs filling." He glared at her and she shrank back. He raised his cane and struck her on the side of the head. She reeled, but did not fall over. Sosie smiled. "Stubborn." She backed into the closed police box door, where Edward had turned and was watching what was going on in horror. Sosie swung his cane and hit her again. She slumped forward and he caught her. Lifted her and threw her over his shoulder. "The dogs can take care of you," said Sosie through the glass. He pulled on the door and it opened. Edward fell out and Sosie was about to command the dogs to kill him when he saw a car and an ambulance heading up the road towards them. He swore and dashed to the side of the lane. He needs to call the dogs off as well. He swore, called the dogs, and dashed to the side of the lane. There was a low wall that separated his estate from the road, so he threw Dawn over it, climbed over himself. He swore, called the dogs and dashed to the side of the lane. There was a low wall that separated his estate from the road, so he threw Dawn over it and climbed over it himself. The four was quickly over the wall after him. Once across those, he picked Dawn back up, started running towards the house, rather than his house. Edward lay half in and half out of the phone box. He could see that something was approaching, but the cold and pain became too much at this point. He tried to crawl forward, stumbled on his hands, and fell into the dirt. He lost consciousness moments later. Poor little fella. It's been a bad day, isn't he? He's just lived 39 years in what feels like a split second. Right, so File, Export to Word. Next. And Export. Yep. And then we'll whack you into Grammarly, which is what I shouldn't call Grammarly. Right, so General, move you, can go away and tell the story and doneth. Right. Right, that was very easy, but then I hardly changed it, and it has definitely been through Grammarly before, so that's good. Almost there. How long have I been going today? Let's minimise that, open that, copy that, paste that, copy that, paste that. Oh, no, not 2 line spacing, not 10. There we go. Right, so there we go. Really important chapter that kind of establishes an awful lot of things. And it's kind of a 2-part chapter in a way, because that's kind of telling you what happened to Edward, and the next bit is effectively how he became Sir Teddy. Might as well do that now. And then that leaves me 14 to do. And maybe I'll do some more today. We shall see how I feel. Yeah, I could do quite a lot more today, because tomorrow I'm going to be busy most of the day. So if I can do another 2 chapters today to get me to chapter 21, that'll leave me 12 with 4 days of working time available. I can do this. Right, Wednesday the 28th of February 2018. Hey Siri, what day was the 28th of February 2018? Said that too fast. Hey Siri, what day was the 28th of February 2018?
It was Wednesday, the 28th of February 2018.
Thanks, lovely. Right then, so Wednesday the 28th of February 2018, chapter 19, Teddy's story. And this literally goes back to the previous chapter. You can't be, Edward, said Molly. You're an old man. Sir Teddy rolled his wheelchair forward. I promise you that I am, Molly. When Sosie took you away, the best way to understand what happened is that he made you sleep. A special sleep during which you did not age one day. You have been asleep for 103 years, Molly. But, Molly closed her eyes, that means you're over 100 years old too. That's right, said Sir Teddy, a look of sadness on his face. But I also slept, Molly. You won't remember, but I saw you getting into the car with Sosie that fateful morning in 1915. I told the police, but they could not find you. 8 years later, I encountered Max Sosie again. I was 15, and he recognised me as the little boy that had almost caused him to be exposed 8 years before. He tried to kill me. Sir Teddy gestured to his legs. I never walked again. Also, he made me sleep. But I woke after only 39 years. Although I was born 110 years ago, I've only celebrated my birthday 71 times. Molly let go of Edward, unsure but intrigued. What was the last thing you said to me? By the docks? Sir Teddy reached out and took Molly's hand, and took Molly's gently. Took Molly's gently, did he? That's a bit forward. Let's add the word. Took Molly's hand gently. I offered to marry you if Alfie did not come back from the war. It was a crass and stupid thing to say, Molly, but I was 7 years old, and I was completely and utterly in love with you. Let's lose the and utterly. But I was completely in love with you. His eyes went red again, and Molly put her hands over her mouth. As much as a 7-year-old can be, at any rate. Oh, my goodness, she exclaimed. I can see it, you, Edward. I can see it in your eyes. She stepped from the hospital bed and hugged him, tears pouring from her face. Sir Teddy patted, I'm going to say stroked, her back gently. Rebecca stepped over to Sayward, her eyes wide. What the hell are we caught up in? She asked her quietly. Sayward smiled. I don't know, but for a brief moment, Molly isn't thinking about what Sosie did to her, and the old man is full of pure joy. She hugged Rebecca. I don't mind being able to see thoughts when they're as nice as that. Sayward smiled and shook her head. The nurse touched her shoulder. We are ready to examine you properly. Let's say we're. Let's put the contraction in. Can you come back through? Of course, said Sayward. She went over to Molly and tapped her shoulder. There is a doctor here to check that I'm not too badly hurt. If you need me, I'll be in the next room. Molly let go of Sir Teddy and stood up. Thank you, she said, and wiped her hands across her eyes again. I assume that you are Miss Amapofo, said the old man. Sayward nodded. Thank you for what you did for Molly from the bottom of my heart. I am so pleased you got out of there safely as well. Once your doctor has looked at you, please do not leave the hospital. I would like to talk to you. I doubt I'm going anywhere other than a police interview room, at least for now, said Sayward. Sir Teddy nodded. Quite probably. He tapped his head, and Sayward looked at him, not understanding. He did it again, raising his eyebrows. Was he asking her to read his mind? She concentrated and realised that he was trying to communicate to her. If you know my link to Nathan Walsh, please do not reveal it to the police, he was thinking. I will explain why later. If you have understood, please respond by saying take care and giving Molly a hug. She gave him an odd look. Take care, she said, realising that she had phrased it as a question. She shook her head and turned back to Molly and gave her a warm and reassuring hug. I'm next door. Call me if you need me. The doctor can't wait, Miss Amapofo, said the nurse from the curtain. Sayward glanced back at Sir Teddy and Molly and left the cubicle. Once Sayward had been examined and given some anti-inflammatory drugs for the swelling around her face, she was released back into police custody. Sayward and Molly were driven to what the police called the Sark. Rebecca and Sir Teddy were permitted to follow in Sir Teddy's car, which was a black Mercedes, driven by Sir Teddy's driver, a cheerful woman called Angela. Sayward allowed herself to reach into the mind of one of the police officers to find out what the Sark was, and she was glad that she had done it that way rather than asking them directly, because she was sure that if Molly heard the phrase sexual assault referral centre, this would have caused her a lot more distress. They were interviewed individually about what had happened. So told them about the violence and the torture she had endured, but it was clear there had been no sexual element to her abuse. Molly, on the other hand, took a long time to open up to the officer that was interviewing her, and it only happened once Saywood agreed to be in the room with her. The interview was recorded on video, not that Molly understood what it meant, even when it was explained to her. When she finally felt secure enough to tell the officer what she endured, Molly broke down several times and would not be convinced that she had done nothing wrong. Saywood allowed herself to reach into Molly's mind, trying to understand why she felt she deserved the appalling things that had happened. When she found out, Saywood was surprised by the mundanity of it. It seemed that Molly had wanted to be intimate with her new husband, Alfie, the day before he left to go to war. Molly and Alfie had both remained fully clothed and absolutely nothing had happened, but Molly believed that what Sophie had done was some kind of divine retribution for the heinous sin of trying to initiate a sexual encounter with the man she had married earlier that day. It's going to take a long time to adjust to the 21st century, Saywood thought to herself. Molly refused a physical examination outright, despite attempts by the staff at the centre to make her understand they were trying to help her. Once that was done, Saywood was told that she could go home if she wanted. She wanted to, but there was a problem with Molly. She had not been formally identified, and the police did not believe that she had been born in 1898. But the details had been given. Once they'd found the records, something they'll go had checked out. A. Molly Smith. Nay. Now, is that how you put it? Maiden name. Okay, lovely. Okay, that's good. A. Molly Smith, née Clark, had been born on the date she had given and at the same location. That Molly had vanished, never to be seen again, in 1915, when she was 17 years old. Molly had been incensed, and although her story was mad, the doctor did not believe that she was. The issue was what to do with her. Staying here, effective in custody, was not believed to be in her best interest. Sir Teddy provided a solution. He offered to put her up for the time being. Saywood looked into his mind and saw only honourable intent. Sir Teddy felt that he had failed her in 1915 and there was no way he was going to do so again. His knighthood certainly helped speed up the discussion, and when it was put to Molly, she accepted without hesitation. It was approaching 1:30 in the morning. Sir Teddy had attempted to send Angela home so he could get a taxi, but she had insisted on waiting. The police had a car ready to take Saywood and Rebecca home, but Sir Teddy offered to take them back into Leicester if they wanted. Saywood was hesitant simply because she wanted Molly to have some time with Sir Teddy for them to catch up. Hang on, that's what I want to say, but is it the best way of saying it? Saywood was hesitant, simply she wanted Molly to have some time with Sir Teddy. It was Sir Teddy himself that talked around. She clearly trusts you, he had said. I think you can help her to adjust. Sir Saywood had agreed, and the four of them ended up in Sir Teddy's car. Molly was in awe. She'd never seen anything like it. The car pulled away from the referral centre. I want you to understand my involvement, said Ted Saywood once they were out on the road. He kidnapped Molly when I was 7. I never forgave myself. I told the police I'd seen her getting into Sophie's car. They said they'd visited him, but there was nothing suspicious happening at his home. About 2 weeks later, I saw him approach a girl on the beach road. I told her that Molly had gone away with him and had never been seen again, so she changed her mind and did not get into the car with him. He was furious and hit me with his cane, but he got away. Molly paled on hearing this. Saywood could see flashes of the same cane being used to subdue her, so she leaned across and grabbed Molly's hand. The girl, Ethel, took me home. My father beat me as soon as the door closed behind me. He was a brute, said Sir Teddy. Molly spoke up. He was horrible. He was so cruel to Alfie. He used to beat him regularly. Sir Teddy nodded. I got lightly in comparison, at least until Alfie went away. Then I became his target. Ethel used to come and see me every couple of weeks to buy me a cake from the baker's further up Tontine Street. Folkestone was the port where most of the soldiers went to France to fight, and one day Ethel met a young officer from Northampton. When he came home on leave, he would take her back to see his parents, and eventually they married and had a child. She continued writing to me throughout this time, and I would write back. She was worried about me. She knew what my father used to do to my mother and me. Ethel's husband died in the war. She was lucky, and thanks to help from his parents, she was able to stay in their house. Molly burst into tears. Alfie died too, didn't he? Sir Teddy's eyes misted up. I was 10 the day the telegram came through. It was a Monday morning. I remember it clearly. What the hell is that? It was a Monday morning. I just need a name there, I think, as well. So if he was born in... When did we say he was born? 1908. Ruth, that'll do me. Sir Teddy's eyes missed up. I was 10 on the day the telegram threw. I remember it clearly. It was a Monday morning. I had a crush on the telegram girl. Her name was Ruth and she was about my age. My mum broke down. I've lost my place. My mum broke down and could not stop crying. It was 1918. I've been fighting for almost 3 years. My dad went out and, as he often did, spent the housekeeping money on ale. He had a terrible hangover that Tuesday, and he beat my poor mother so badly he almost killed her. He put his arm around Molly's shoulders and kissed the side of her head. I'm so sorry, Molly. I did not know when was the right time to tell you. You've had enough distressing things happen to you today. I knew, she said softly. I knew he was gone. I mean, they all are. Everyone I ever met is dead. Except me, said Sir Teddy. Yeah, said Molly with a brave smile. Except you. In 1922, on the way home from my job at the docks, someone stole my wages. My dad hit the roof. He hurt me so badly that I was unable to work for a month. I told Ethel in my monthly letter about what had happened, and a few days later I got a letter with money for a ticket to Northampton and an offer of her spare room. She'd even spoken to a boss and arranged a job for me. So for the next year I worked at a shoe manufacturer in Northampton. Ethel was 9 years older than me, but we were close. Not inappropriately so, but little son David adored me, and Ethel and I became great friends. I think, had it not been for what Sophie did next, we would have worked out our true feelings for each other. Eventually. Then one day the following year I saw a car, the same car that you were taken away in. Sophie was trying to abduct a girl then too, and I prevented it. He recognised me as the boy who'd done the same 8 years before and deliberately ran me down. He took me to his home and painted my portrait. When it was done, he took an axe to my legs. I passed out from the pain, and when I woke up, it was 1962. A wonderful woman from Dawn explained that he could trap people in his artwork. She helped me to escape, but I was close to death. He followed us with dogs, and Dawn sacrificed herself to save me. I was taken to hospital. At 15, I was still technically a child, but the state did not want to be responsible for me. There was a fad for adoption in the 60s. It was briefly seen as a cool thing to do. I was noticed by a horrendous and rich family called the Ainsleys, who had never had a child of their own. They often got bad press for their greed, closing viable businesses because they could make more money selling the assets and making lots of people unemployed. They decided they wanted some positive media attention, so they looked around at the possibility of adopting a child. They'd chosen one little boy. When they found out there was a cripple looking for a home, they decided this would make a better headline and dumped the other child. Abandoned. Abandoned the other child. When they first adopted me, I did not appreciate how vulgar they were. I came from a poor background where often we had to go without because my father had spent our food money at the local pub. I thought they were wonderful, but they soon became bored of me. I had a nanny who was far closer to me than the Ainsleys ever were. I started to do a lot of work campaigning for the rights of people with disabilities. They insisted I live with them because it reminded the media they'd once done something generous. They liked the fact that I was a campaigner because the positive press rubbed off well on them. They did put me in their will as the legal heir of their estate. There was a clause that I was not allowed to donate more than a certain percentage to charity. I think they thought I would waste their hard-earned assets. So when they died, I inherited the properties and the money. All of the houses they are still owned by me, but apart from the one that I live in, the others are used by charities I support, and when I do die, the ownership will pass to them. I became obsessed with finding Max Sosi. As I gained more contacts through my charity work, I tried to investigate him. I realised if I could be freed from the canvas, so could other people. I hired private investigators, and eventually I got my lucky break. I found him. I had him photographed to be sure that it was him. Although the light had not been all that good when I had previously seen him, I was fairly sure he had not aged since then. I looked at all of the unresolved missing girls cases. I'm just going to adapt that sentence because I don't like it. I had him photographed myself. I became obsessed with finding Max Sosi. As I gained more contacts from my charity work, I tried to investigate him. I was if I could be freed from the canvas, so could other people. I had private investigators, and eventually I got my lucky break. I found him. I had him photographed to be sure it was him. He did not appear to have aged a day. I looked at all of the unresolved missing girls cases around the country. I assumed that most that were never solved was something to do with him. When I finally found out details of where he lived, I employed Nathan Walsh to discreetly break into his properties and take some pictures. I was looking for two things. I was looking for a picture of you, Molly, and Dawn, the lady that recruited me. I had him say to her that there was a space in one of his paintings that needed filling. My picture. Somewhere in his collection is a picture of a boy in a wheelchair with Dawn's face. She had been badly bitten by dogs, so we would not have had time to create a fresh picture for her. And this bloke wants to paint me, said Rebecca with a shiver. You could have been his next victim, yes, said Sir Teddy. He paused and looked directly at Sayward. I'm interested to know how you pulled Molly from the canvas. Freed. I'm interested to know how you freed Molly from the canvas. Sayward shrugged. I don't know how I did it, she confessed. I was moments from death. I was choking on something they had forced into my throat. That sounds like there might be an innuendo in there, so I'm going to change it. I was choking on a stone. They'd forced into my throat. I could hear Molly in the picture telling me that she wanted to survive. I think my thoughts synchronised with hers. That has to be something to do with how I pulled her out. Would you be willing to try it again, if we locate Dawn, for example? So we shook her head. I do appreciate what you've done for me. I do appreciate what you've done for me, Sir Teddy, but all I want is for the Institute to teach me how to fully shut out the voices I hear from other people. After that, I just want to live a normal life. The car was pulling into the street containing their flat. Sir Teddy smiled. Well, irrespective of what you decide, Miss Amapofo, I think that it is potentially dangerous for you to be at home at the moment. I will not put any pressure on you to help me, I promise you that, but I would like you and Miss Taylor to stay with me for a while, for your safety, until he is found. Molly leaned forward. Please, Sayward, she begged. Rebecca smiled. After the last week, it would be nice if I'm not watching my back the whole time. But it's up to you, Say. Sayward looked at the three other people in the car. Sayward looked at her fellow passengers, then leaned over and kissed Rebecca on the lips with a broad smile. Molly's eyes widened at this, but she said nothing. I have no idea how long it will take to find him. They may never. He's been around for a very long time. But if it makes you feel safe, Bex, then yeah. I'm happy to. Let's lose the do it. I'm happy to. Sir Teddy smiled. Excellent news. I would suggest that you go into your flat now and collect the things you need for a couple of nights. I can send someone around tomorrow for anything further that you require. Is that... says Axel. could say acceptable. Is that acceptable? That's perfect, said Rebecca. They opened the door and got out of the car. Angela, could I ask you to accompany them for me? His driver smiled. Certainly. Thank you, Angela. One cannot be too careful. Angela, Rebecca and Saywood made their way to the door that led to the stairwell and up to the flat. Sir Teddy turned to Molly and held her hand. This will not be easy for you, Molly. The world has changed more in the last 100 years than you can possibly imagine. I will introduce these things to you slowly. There are some wonderful things, as well as some terrible things. For example, you will not believe how music and moving pictures have changed. Did you ever get to go and see a movie at the Central Picture Theatre in Folkestone? Nah, said Molly. We could never afford it. Sir Teddy smiled. Such a shame. Molly pointed after Saywood and Rebecca. Is that normal now? Do girls always kiss girls? One may kiss whomever one wants, said Sir Teddy with a smile. As I said, a lot of changes. I got through it, and now I will help you to do so if you are happy to let me. And I will help you to do so if you are happy to let me. Molly gave a tearful smile. Of course I am, Edward. Perfect, said Sir Teddy with a grin. Welcome to the 21st century, Molly. Right, let's export that to a Word document. Let's drag that into Grammarly. So what happened is that he made you sleep. Yep, we'll go with that. 7-year-old, okay. Take care. And hugging Molly. Felt that he had failed her in 1915. She trusts you. She trusts you. She trusts you. Let's do the most. Blimey. Right then, file, download, Draggity it off ski, there ski, I don't know why I'm talking stupidly ski, and okay, that is another chapter finished. So let me just drag that. Wow, so I now have 14. Oh, that's gone a bit crazy. Why is that doing that? That needs to go just there. Right, so now I've just got, I said 14 chapters to edit. I have 5 days to do it. I shall do some more today, actually. I think I will do a couple more today, see if I can get effectively tomorrow's done. That'd be excellent. Then that'll just leave me 12 to do over 5 days. If I can get any done tomorrow, superb. I might actually, because I'm thinking about staying in a hotel overnight to just so I don't have to drive for as long. Anyway, let me. Sorry, this is going to look ugly for a moment. Oh, no. I don't want to install the software again. Right, let's do this. Let's do that. So thank you very much for anybody who's watched. It's not been the most interactive of sessions, but that's fine. So thank you. I can see I've got a couple of people watching. Thank you so much. I may be back later today because I would like to try and get some more chapters signed off. As I say, if I really want to get these last 14 chapters it is now done by Sunday and get this project finally, hopefully, signed off. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, follow me socials, and thank you very much. Talk to you all soon. Bye bye.